In 2007, scientists launched a tiny creature into the vacuum of outer space with no protection whatsoever, fully expecting it to die within seconds, and instead, it came back alive, completely unbothered, and ready to have babies. That creature is called a tardigrade, and by the end of this video, you're going to understand why some scientists genuinely believe it might be one of the last living things on Earth when everything else is finally gone. But that's not even the strangest thing on this list, because there's an animal on this planet right now, sitting somewhere near you, doing something to its own body that should be biologically impossible. We're going to get to exactly what that animal is, and exactly what it's doing, at the very end of this video, and I promise you it's stranger than the tardigrade. Every single animal in this video is real, and every single ability is scientifically documented, tested, and confirmed by researchers who initially refused to believe what they were looking at. If nature genuinely fascinates you the way it fascinates me, go ahead and subscribe now, because we dig into something like this every single week. Let's get into it. Number 9. There's a species of jellyfish so small it could sit comfortably on your fingernail, and when it gets old, sick, or injured, it doesn't die the way every other animal on Earth does. Instead, it reverts its own cells back to an earlier stage of life, essentially transforming itself back into a baby version of itself, and then simply grows up all over again. Scientists call this process transdifferentiation, and it's the only confirmed case in the entire animal kingdom of a creature actually reversing its own biological age. In laboratory conditions, researchers have watched individual jellyfish cycle backward through this process dozens of times in a row, which means, in theory, this creature could keep doing this forever. This means the only thing that actually kills this jellyfish in the wild is being eaten by a predator or dying from disease before it gets the chance to reverse itself, because old age itself is simply not a threat to it. Some biologists have described this species as biologically immortal, which is a real scientific term meaning it doesn't age toward death the way every other multicellular organism on this planet does. Researchers are now studying its cells specifically to understand what triggers human aging, because whatever switch this jellyfish figured out might eventually help us understand our own. Number 8. There's a small aquatic salamander that can lose an entire limb, and within a matter of weeks, grow back a perfect, fully functional replacement, complete with bones, nerves, and blood vessels all correctly connected. This isn't scar tissue or a rough approximation. This is a complete, working limb that looks and functions exactly like the original one that was lost. Even more remarkably, this creature can regrow parts of its own heart, sections of its spinal cord, and even portions of its own brain, all without forming any scarring whatsoever. A human who suffers damage to any of these areas faces permanent, often devastating consequences, while this small salamander simply repairs itself, as if the injury had never happened at all. Scientists around the world are actively researching exactly how this creature's cells know precisely what to rebuild and where, because unlocking that mechanism could eventually change human medicine entirely. But there's a bitter irony here, because the wild population of this exact creature is critically endangered, living in only one single, heavily polluted lake in Mexico. The animal that could potentially help humans regrow damaged organs is quietly disappearing from the only place on Earth it has ever called home. We're 2 abilities in, and honestly, everything coming up gets significantly stranger from here, so if you're already hooked, go ahead and subscribe right now before we continue. Let's keep going. Number 7. There's a small shrimp, only about 10 centimeters long, that can throw a punch so fast it accelerates faster than an actual bullet fired from a gun. This punch moves so fast through the water that it actually causes the water itself to boil for a fraction of a second, purely from the speed of the motion alone. Scientists call this cavitation, and the tiny flash of light and heat it produces briefly reaches temperatures comparable to the surface of the sun, all generated by a creature smaller than your hand. This strike has been recorded shattering aquarium glass in laboratory settings, which means scientists studying this creature actually had to build specialized tanks with reinforced walls just to safely keep one in captivity. Beyond just the punch, this creature also possesses the most complex visual system ever documented in the animal kingdom, with 16 distinct types of color receptors compared to the 3 that human eyes possess. This means this small shrimp perceives a version of color and light so far beyond human comprehension that researchers still genuinely debate exactly what its visual experience of the world actually looks like. Number 6. There's a creature living in every ocean on Earth that has 3 separate hearts, blue-colored blood, and 9 completely independent brains, 1 central brain and 1 smaller brain located in each of its 8 arms. Each individual arm can taste, touch, and even make independent decisions without waiting for instructions from the central brain, meaning the octopus is essentially operating 9 separate thinking systems simultaneously at all times. Researchers have actually observed severed octopus arms continuing to reach for and grab food on their own for several minutes after being separated from the animal's body, which genuinely unsettled the scientists studying it. An octopus can also completely change the color, texture, and pattern of its entire skin in less than a second, allowing it to disappear almost perfectly against nearly any background it encounters. Despite having this level of intelligence and problem-solving ability documented repeatedly in laboratory tests, most octopus species live for only about 1 to 2 years, which remains one of the most puzzling contradictions in modern biology. Number 5. There's a fish that can generate up to 860 volts of electricity directly from its own body, which is roughly 7 times stronger than a standard household electrical outlet. Roughly 80% of this fish's entire body is essentially a biological battery, made up of thousands of specialized cells stacked together specifically to generate and store electrical charge. It uses this ability not just to stun and hunt prey, but also to navigate murky, low-visibility water using weaker electrical pulses that function almost exactly like a built-in radar system. A strong discharge from a large adult electric eel is powerful enough to knock a grown adult human completely off their feet, and in rare cases, even large animals standing in shallow water nearby. Researchers have even successfully used the electrical discharge from a live electric eel to briefly power small electronic devices, essentially proving that this fish is functioning as a literal, living power source. Number 4. There's a small frog that survives winter by allowing its own body to freeze almost completely solid, with its heart stopping entirely and no detectable breathing for weeks at a time. By any conventional medical definition, this frog is essentially clinically dead during this period, with no measurable heartbeat, no breathing, and up to 65% of the water in its body turned into solid ice. The frog survives this by producing enormous amounts of glucose that act like a natural antifreeze, protecting its individual cells from being physically destroyed by the sharp edges of forming ice crystals. When spring arrives and temperatures rise, the frog simply thaws out over several hours. Its heart spontaneously restarts on its own, and it hops away completely unharmed as if nothing had happened at all. Researchers are actively studying this exact freezing and thawing mechanism for potential use in human organ preservation, hoping to eventually extend how long donated organs can survive outside the body before transplant. Number 3 brings us back to the tardigrade from the very beginning of this video, and now it's time to actually explain how something this small can survive conditions that would instantly kill nearly every other living organism on Earth. When conditions become extreme, this microscopic creature can voluntarily reduce its own metabolism to nearly 0% of normal activity, essentially pressing pause on its own biological processes almost entirely. In this dormant state, it can survive temperatures colder than -200 degrees Celsius, temperatures hotter than 150 degrees Celsius, radiation levels 1,000 times stronger than what would kill a human, and complete dehydration for up to 30 years. This exact combination of survival abilities is why scientists sent it into the vacuum of space in 2007, and why it returned not just alive, but healthy enough to successfully reproduce shortly afterward. Some scientists now genuinely believe that if a global catastrophe were ever severe enough to end nearly all life on Earth, this creature would likely be among the very last survivors standing, quietly waiting out the disaster in its dormant state. Number 2. There's a small shrimp with one oversized claw that snaps shut so fast it generates a sonic shockwave loud enough to briefly reach nearly 200 decibels, louder than a firing gunshot heard right beside your ear. This shockwave is powerful enough to instantly stun or kill small prey animals from a short distance away, all generated purely through the mechanical speed of one single claw snapping shut. These shrimp typically live in massive underground colonies containing thousands of individuals, and when many of them snap their claws simultaneously, the combined sound becomes so loud that it can actually interfere with submarine sonar equipment. This is genuinely why military submarines have historically used large pistol shrimp colonies as natural sound cover, deliberately hiding their engine noise within the constant background chaos these tiny creatures produce. A creature small enough to fit comfortably in the palm of your hand is generating enough raw acoustic energy to help hide an entire military vessel, purely through the mechanical speed of a single claw. And now, number 1, let's finally go back to that creature I mentioned at the very beginning, doing something to its own body that should be biologically impossible, somewhere near you, right now. The animal is the common earthworm, an animal you have almost certainly seen dozens of times without ever realizing what it's actually capable of doing to its own body. An earthworm has multiple hearts, but the truly strange ability is this: if you cut certain species of earthworm in half, in the right location along its body, both halves can potentially survive, and in some cases, the worm can regenerate into two fully separate, fully functional living worms. This doesn't work if the cut happens in the wrong location, and it doesn't work for every single species of worm, but for the ones where it does work, this means the animal doesn't just heal an injury, it can potentially become two separate living beings from what was originally one single body. This raises a genuinely strange philosophical question that scientists still debate, because if one single living creature can become two separate living creatures through simple division, at what exact point did the original individual actually end, and two new individuals begin? This ability exists in the ordinary soil beneath gardens and lawns all over the world, meaning something capable of splitting into two separate living creatures has likely been living within a few meters of your own home this entire time. Out of every impossible ability in this entire video, the one hiding quietly in your own backyard turned out to be one of the strangest of them all. 9 impossible abilities. A jellyfish that reverses its own aging and might genuinely never die of old age. A salamander that regrows its own heart, spine, and brain tissue with zero scarring, even as its wild population quietly vanishes. A shrimp that punches faster than a bullet and sees colors that don't exist to human eyes. An octopus running 9 separate brains at once, whose severed arms keep reaching for food on their own. A fish that's essentially a living battery, powerful enough to knock a grown adult off their feet. A frog that freezes completely solid, stops its own heart for weeks, and simply thaws back to life every spring. A microscopic creature that survives outer space, extreme radiation, and 30 years without water. A shrimp whose claw snap is loud enough to help hide an entire military submarine. And a common earthworm, living quietly in your own backyard, capable of splitting into 2 entirely separate living beings. 9 real, documented, verified abilities, and every single one of them exists quietly on this planet right now, most of them completely ignored by almost everyone who walks past them every single day. What genuinely fascinates me about this list isn't just how strange each individual ability is, it's how many of them are hiding in completely ordinary places, oceans, gardens, and ponds most of us walk past without a second thought. Nature didn't put its most extraordinary abilities exclusively in remote jungles or distant oceans nobody will ever visit. It scattered them everywhere, including places most of us walk past without ever looking twice. If this genuinely changed how you look at the natural world, subscribe now, because next week we're covering 9 more abilities like this, and I promise the very last one is even harder to believe than the earthworm. Comment below and tell me honestly which one of these 9 abilities you genuinely didn't believe was real until you saw the full explanation. See you next day. And the next time you're walking through your own backyard, it might be worth remembering that something quietly extraordinary is very likely living right beneath your feet.